Hello, everyone. Welcome back and thanks for joining us today. We have a brand new story to share with you, so let's get started. I never imagined my life would unravel in the space of a single afternoon. But there I was, standing in my own kitchen, staring at a stack of crisp white papers on the counter, my name printed neatly at the top. Divorce agreement. The words blurred as my vision swam, the cold realization sinking into my bones like ice water. My hands trembled as I flipped through the pages, scanning the legal jargon that reduced 15 years of marriage to a few clinical paragraphs. My husband, Daniel Carter, had signed at the bottom, his signature bold and deliberate, as if this were nothing more than another business deal. A sharp buzzing jolted me from my shock. My phone, face down on the marble countertop, vibrated with a new message. I hesitated before picking it up, already dreading what I would find. The name flashing across the screen sent a fresh wave of nausea crashing over me. Daniel. There's someone else. It's serious. Papers are on the counter. Take your time to process. We'll talk when you're ready. The words were so casual, as if he were telling me the Wi-Fi was down or that we were out of milk. My breath hitched, my chest tightening with something dangerously close to a sob. Someone else. I felt my stomach twist violently, my body rejecting the truth even as my mind forced me to confront it. I gripped the counter for support, my knees threatening to buckle. This wasn't happening, not now. Not when my father was lying in hospice, his body failing more and more each day. Not when I was still waiting for test results from the doctor, uncertain if my own body was betraying me as well. The irony burned. A failing marriage and a possibly failing body, all in the same cruel moment. Then another realization struck me, sharp as a dagger. Daniel had planned this. I turned back to the divorce papers, scanning the financial settlement section. My mind, still groggy from shock, struggled to process the numbers. He was assuming all our debts. The student loans from my MBA at Wharton, gone. The $90,000 renovation loan for the house, wiped clean. The medical bills from last year's surgery, which I had been making slow, careful payments on, erased. It was too generous. Daniel Carter was many things, charming, brilliant, ruthless in negotiations. But generous? Never without reason. A slow, creeping suspicion coiled around my gut. My eyes scanned the fine print, my mind suddenly hyper-aware of every clause, every legal loophole. And then, it hit me. Olivia Harper, the name slashed through my thoughts like a knife. My best friend. My confidant, the woman who had stood beside me at my wedding, smiling as she adjusted my veil, the woman who had toasted to our forever, the woman who had, for years, assured me she would rather die than betray me. My phone buzzed again. Another message, this time from an unknown number. My stomach lurched as I read the words. I just want you to know, I never meant for this to happen. It just did. I hope someday you can forgive me. Olivia. A cold laugh bubbled up from my throat, bitter and sharp. It just happened? What a convenient excuse for a calculated betrayal. So this was their plan. Daniel had orchestrated the perfect escape, neatly transferring our financial burdens onto Olivia, the woman who had spent years flaunting her investment firm's success and her multi-million-dollar portfolio. I could see it so clearly now. Olivia, eager to please, agreeing to take on our debts as a grand romantic gesture, blind to the fact that she was financing Daniel's clean getaway. They thought they had won. The betrayal should have shattered me. It should have left me crumpled on the floor, drowning in grief. And for a moment, just a fleeting moment, it did. I felt the weight of everything I had lost pressing down on me. My marriage, my best friend, my future. But then something changed. The fog of heartbreak lifted, making way for something else. Not sadness, not devastation. clarity. I straightened, gripping the counter with steady hands. My MBA-trained mind, the same mind that once handled multi-million-dollar accounts with ease, roared to life. I had spent 15 years directing my intelligence toward supporting Daniel, toward running our home, toward being the perfect wife. No more. I picked up the divorce papers again, this time with a calculating eye. I wasn't going to fight this divorce. No. Daniel wanted out. He could have it. Olivia wanted to take on my debts. She could have them. Every single one. Only, they wouldn't just be getting what they expected. They were going to get so much more. I grabbed my laptop and opened a new document, the title burning with intent. Strategy. If Daniel and Olivia thought they had outmaneuvered me, they were about to learn the most important lesson of their lives. I had always been the better strategist. I barely slept that night. Instead, I sat in the dim glow of my laptop screen, fingers flying over the keyboard as I outlined every financial connection, every legal loophole, and every potential angle I could exploit. Daniel Carter had spent years underestimating me. He had dismissed my career when I chose to step back and support his. He had overlooked my skills when I managed our household finances. And now, he had made the grievous mistake of assuming I would be too emotionally devastated to think clearly. He was wrong. By dawn, I had constructed a framework that would make his escape anything but clean. Olivia might have agreed to take on my debts, but she had no idea what she was inheriting, not just my student loans and our home renovation balance. Oh no, that would be too easy. I would ensure that when she stepped into my shoes, she'd feel the full weight of every financial decision Daniel and I had ever made, and a few more she hadn't planned on. At 7 a.m., I made my first call. "Jonathan Weiss," a familiar voice answered, still groggy from sleep. "Who the hell is calling this early?" "Jonathan, it's me, Evelyn Monroe." There was a pause, then the sound of sheets rustling as he sat up. "Evelyn? Damn, I haven't heard from you since I left finance to play corporate wife," I finished for him. "I need your help." Jonathan had been my closest colleague at Harrison and Finch, one of the top investment firms in New York. We had started together, both climbing the ladder in high-stakes finance, until I left to support Daniel's career. But Jonathan hadn't forgotten my skills, and he owed me. "I need to move fast," I continued. "I need every debt, every liability, every possible financial obligation linked to my name, transferred, leveraged, and restructured." There was a beat of silence. "Evelyn," his voice was careful now, "what exactly are you planning?" I smiled, though there was no humor in it. "Let's just say I'm about to teach a very expensive lesson in betrayal." Jonathan exhaled sharply. "I hope to God I never get on your bad side." By noon, the first domino had fallen. I secured a home equity line of credit, HELOC, against the house. Normally, this process took weeks, but thanks to my pristine credit score and financial history, it was expedited. The moment the funds were available, I initiated the next phase, rolling our existing debts into new, high-yield variable interest instruments. Daniel and Olivia thought they were absorbing a few $100,000 in debt. They were about to inherit millions. I sat in the bank's private office, pen poised over the final signature line. The banker, a middle-aged woman with a sharp suit and an even sharper gaze, watched me carefully. "Ms. Monroe," she said, her voice polite but hesitant, "this is an aggressive restructuring. Are you sure?" I met her gaze evenly. "Absolutely." The moment I signed, a surge of satisfaction ran through me. The new financial structure was now locked in. And when Daniel and Olivia finalized the divorce settlement, when they willingly took on every financial burden in my name, it would be too late to reverse any of it. They had played their game. Now I was playing mine. At 3 p.m., my phone buzzed. A new message from Daniel. I assume you've seen the papers. I know this is hard, but I think we can get through this amicably. Let me know when you're ready to talk. I stared at the message for a long moment before typing my response. Of course, let's talk. Lunch at Serena's tomorrow at 1. Daniel wouldn't suspect a thing. By the time we sat down at that table, he would think he had everything under control. And by the time he walked out, he would have no idea his entire future was already crumbling beneath him. Serena's was exactly as I remembered. Warm lighting, polished marble tables, and the scent of truffle oil lingering in the air. It was where Daniel and I had celebrated our 5-year anniversary, where we'd toasted his first major case win, where I had once thought we were building something together. Now, I was here to watch it all burn. I arrived first, making sure I had the strategic advantage. I chose a table near the back, away from the bustle, where he wouldn't be able to easily escape. I ordered a glass of white wine and sat with my back straight, my expression carefully composed. At 12:59, Daniel walked in. He scanned the restaurant, his eyes landing on me, and I saw it, the brief flicker of uncertainty in his gaze. He had expected me to be frazzled, heartbroken, maybe even begging for answers. He had counted on me being too consumed with grief to fight back. Instead, he found a woman who looked completely in control. "Evelyn," he said, forcing a small smile as he slid into the seat across from me. "You look, well." I took a sip of my wine. "Of course, why wouldn't I?" His lips pressed together for a fraction of a second, but he quickly recovered. "I appreciate you meeting me," he said smoothly. "I just wanted to make sure this process is as easy for you as possible." I tilted my head, feigning curiosity. "Oh? Is that why you left divorce papers on the counter instead of telling me to my face?" A shadow crossed his face, and for the first time, he didn't have a quick answer. Or is it because you knew I wouldn't sign them without looking at the financials first? I continued, my voice calm, almost conversational. "Because that part was interesting." Daniel stiffened. "Evelyn, I have to say," I interrupted, setting down my glass. "I was surprised when I saw the settlement. It's incredibly generous." I let the word hang between us, letting him think, for just a moment, that I was buying into his narrative. His shoulders relaxed slightly. "I just want to do right by you," he said, with that practiced sincerity that once would have fooled me. "After everything, You're assuming all of our debts," I cut him off. "That's a big responsibility." His smile faltered. "Well, And Olivia agreed to this?" I asked, raising an eyebrow. "She's comfortable taking on my student loans, the renovation loan, the medical bills?" I watched the moment the realization began to dawn. A flicker of something crossed his face, confusion, then hesitation. "Of course," he said, but his voice wasn't as smooth now. "We've discussed it." I leaned back in my chair, tilting my head. "Did you, Daniel? Did you discuss it in detail? Or did you just assume this would be an easy escape?" His fingers curled slightly around the menu, his knuckles whitening. He knew something was wrong now. I pulled a folder from my bag and slid it across the table. "Because I took the liberty of restructuring our debts this week," I said casually. "Since you're so eager to assume them, I wanted to make sure they were consolidated efficiently." Daniel didn't reach for the folder. He just stared at it like it might bite him. Finally, he flipped it open. And as his eyes scanned the first page, his entire posture changed. What the hell is this?" His voice was quiet but laced with tension. I took another sip of my wine. That, I said, is the new debt structure attached to the assets you're claiming in the divorce. He flipped through the pages, his breathing growing sharper, faster. This isn't... Oh, but it is, I cut in smoothly. You and Olivia generously agreed to assume all debts in the settlement, all of them. And since the house still had available equity, I decided to use it. Took out a HELOC, consolidated some things. You'll notice the new total. Daniel's jaw clenched. $2.8 million. I made sure to structure it with variable interest rates, too, I added lightly. So, depending on market conditions, it could be even higher. His hands tightened into fists, and for the first time, I saw real panic settle in his features. His voice was barely controlled now. You manipulated this. I simply used the framework you provided, I said coolly. I'm just following the terms of the divorce, Daniel. Isn't that what you wanted? He stared at me, chest rising and falling, the weight of his own arrogance crashing down on him. I leaned in slightly. I wonder, I mused, does Olivia know yet? He went pale. That's when I knew he hadn't told her the full extent of what they were taking on. Perfect. I pushed my chair back and stood, smoothing the front of my dress. I'd love to stay and chat, but I have a meeting with my attorney this afternoon. I grabbed my bag and turned to leave, but then paused. Oh, I said, looking back at him. And do me a favor, Daniel. His jaw was so tight I thought his teeth might crack. What? I smiled, slow, cold, unforgiving. Make sure Olivia reads the fine print. Then I walked out, leaving him alone with... I didn't have to wait long. Less than 24 hours after my lunch with Daniel, the first cracks in his carefully constructed fantasy began to show. I was at home, my home, at least for a little longer, going over the final details with Mira, my attorney. She had just finished reviewing the updated settlement papers when my phone vibrated violently against the counter. Daniel, 5 missed calls. A new text popped up. We need to talk, now. I smiled. Mira arched an eyebrow. I take it he's realized. I nodded, setting my phone down and taking a slow sip of my tea. Oh, he's realized. Are you ready for what comes next? I met her gaze, calm and certain. I've been ready for a long time. As if on cue, the doorbell rang. Furious, urgent. I didn't move right away. I wanted him to sweat. I took my time standing, smoothing my blouse, adjusting my posture before strolling to the door and opening it. Daniel stood on my porch, eyes wild, breathing hard like he had just run a mile. For the first time in our 15 years together, he looked completely uncomposed. You've lost your mind, he hissed the moment I opened the door, stepping inside without an invitation. I leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. Hello to you, too. You think this is funny? His voice was low, dangerous. You think you can just financially ruin me and to walk away? Oh, Daniel. I shook my head with mock sympathy. If you feel ruined, that's entirely your doing. You signed the papers. His fists clenched at his sides. This isn't a game, Evelyn. But it is, isn't it? I countered. A game you thought you had already won. He exhaled sharply, running a hand through his hair. He was unraveling. Good. Olivia knows, he said suddenly, his voice strained. Bingo. And? I asked, feigning boredom. He let out a bitter laugh. She's furious. She had no idea the kind of financial liability she was walking into. His eyes burned into mine. You blindsided us. No, Daniel, I corrected smoothly, stepping closer. You blindsided yourself. You underestimated me. You assumed I would roll over, that I wouldn't fight back. I never thought you'd do something this low. I tilted my head. You mean like leaving divorce papers on the counter while I was taking care of my dying mother? I let the words sink in, watching as his jaw tightened. Like running off with someone else before our marriage had even ended. Like selling me a dream and then cutting me out of it the second it became inconvenient for you. He was silent. I didn't start this war, Daniel, I said, voice steady. You did. For a moment, he just stared at me, the weight of reality settling onto his shoulders. You can't win this, he said, but there was no confidence in his voice. I smiled, slow, calculated, deadly. I already have, his nostrils flared. You think you're so damn smart that you've backed me into a corner, but this isn't over. He stepped closer, voice lowering. I will find a way to undo this. I met his gaze, unflinching. Be my guest, but you should know I've already consulted 3 financial analysts and 2 corporate attorneys. It's airtight. His face went pale. He knew I wasn't bluffing. Now, if you'll excuse me, I said, reaching for the door. I have plans tonight. Daniel didn't move right away. He just stood there, staring at me, seething. Finally, he stepped back, turning toward the door. Just as he crossed the threshold, he paused. She'll leave me, he muttered under his breath, almost like he was realizing it for the first time. I didn't say anything. He turned slightly, looking at me differently now. For the first time, there was no arrogance, no entitlement, just something resembling regret. Maybe, just maybe, he was finally understanding the gravity of what he had done. Too little, too late. I shut the door behind him without another word, and as I locked it, I exhaled, feeling lighter than I had in years. Let him try to undo it. Let him beg Olivia to stay. Let him drown in the consequences of his own betrayal. Daniel's downfall didn't come all at once. It started as a whisper, a few raised eyebrows at his law firm, the first hint of something not quite right when Olivia's name suddenly stopped appearing on his social media. The strained smiles when they were seen together in public, like 2 people trying too hard to convince the world and themselves that everything was fine. And then, the explosion. I was finishing my morning coffee when my phone buzzed. Melissa. Oh, this should be good. I answered, barely getting a greeting in before she practically screeched into the phone. Holy shit, I smirked. Good morning to you, too. Morning? Evelyn, are you seeing this? I frowned. Seeing what? Check your email, now. I pulled my laptop closer and refreshed my inbox, and then I saw it. A forwarded email from one of Melissa's contacts at the Boston Business Journal. Subject, Scandal at Madison and Associates. Senior partner faces financial ruin. Oh. My pulse accelerated. I opened the article and devoured the words. Daniel Madison, once regarded as one of the city's most promising corporate attorneys, is facing serious financial scrutiny after recent reports revealed a complex debt restructuring tied to his divorce settlement. Sources close to the firm suggest mounting tensions as Madison's personal financial troubles raise concerns about his long-term stability. Insiders indicate his partner, Olivia Kensington, has begun distancing herself both personally and professionally. I leaned back, slowly exhaling. I hadn't expected it to unravel this fast. I could almost hear the panic in Daniel's voice, see the realization dawning on him as he scrambled to contain the damage. But it was too late. His reputation, the one thing he had spent his entire career cultivating, was now a liability. Melissa's voice brought me back. Evelyn, tell me you knew this was coming. I took a slow sip of coffee, savoring the moment. I had my suspicions. Suspicion? Girl, you just torched his entire existence. I smirked. Number he did that all on his own. Because here's the thing. Debt doesn't just disappear. And when you shift millions of dollars into leveraged obligations, when you restructure assets under hidden entities, the cracks eventually reach the surface. Daniel was bleeding money. And Olivia? She had never signed up for this. The next call came that evening. Daniel. I stared at his name flashing across the screen. Let it ring. Then, finally, I answered. His voice was shaking. Fix this. I almost laughed. I'm sorry. Fix what? This mess. The article. The firm's questioning my financial stability. Clients are pulling out. Olivia. He cut himself off. She's reconsidering everything. I bit my lip, trying to contain the thrill rushing through me. And why is that my problem? His breath hitched. Because you did this. I let silence stretch between us before answering, slow and deliberate. I only made sure you faced the consequences of your own actions, Daniel. Evelyn, he said, voice quieter now. You've made your point. I shouldn't have done what I did. I was selfish. I hurt you. A pause. But you've won, okay? Just help me fix this. For a moment, I almost felt something. Almost. But then I remembered. The late nights crying on the floor of our home while he was off with her. The cold, detached text message ending our marriage. The way he had discarded me like an old investment that no longer served his purpose. So I smiled. I'm sorry, Daniel, I said, mimicking the words he had once thrown at me. There's someone else, and it's serious. He inhaled sharply. You! I ended the call before he could finish, and just like that, I was finally free. I woke up the next morning to chaos. The fallout from the article was worse than I had expected. Daniel wasn't just losing clients. His own firm was turning against him. By noon, my inbox was flooded with updates from Melissa, Jonathan, and a few anonymous insiders. I didn't even have to look at the headlines to know that the financial world was eating him alive. But the cherry on top, Olivia had left him. I scrolled through the messages, reading and rereading the words, my heart pounding with a mixture of triumph and disbelief. Olivia Kensington, the woman who stole my husband, the woman who had casually assumed she could absorb our debts and replace me like a discarded investment, had walked out the moment things got inconvenient. Melissa's latest text had me nearly choking on my coffee. Melissa. Olivia just put their Beacon Hill house on the market. Girl, she is running. I smirked, shaking my head. Of course she was. She had never planned to sync with him. For all of Daniel's brilliance, he had made one critical miscalculation. He thought Olivia was an upgrade, but she was never me. She wasn't the woman who had spent years strategizing, balancing risk, and making sure our finances remained intact. She wasn't the woman who had sacrificed her career, who had built a life with him from nothing. She was a placeholder, a status symbol that lost its value the moment the foundation crumbled. And now, she was gone. My phone rang. I didn't even have to look at the screen to know who it was. Daniel. I let it ring. Then, against my better judgment, I picked up. His voice was unrecognizable. Evelyn. Silence. Then, a breath. Ragged. She left. I closed my eyes, exhaling slowly. I know. Another pause. I didn't think she would. Of course he didn't. He had assumed she would stand by him the way I once had. He thought she would hold him up through the storm. He forgot. Olivia wasn't me. Evelyn, he said, his voice lower now. I was wrong. I raised an eyebrow, waiting, a beat. Then, the confession. I should have never left you. The words hit me like a shockwave. For a moment, I said nothing, because a part of me, a tiny, long-buried part, had waited years to hear them. But now that they were here, they meant nothing. I let out a small, almost amused laugh. You finally figured that out? He didn't respond, and I realized then that Daniel wasn't calling to fight. He wasn't calling to fix anything. He was calling because, for the first time in his life, he had lost, and he had no one left to catch him. "You really thought she'd stay?" I asked, my voice softer now. He inhaled sharply. "I don't know what I thought." A pause. I don't know what to do." And that's when I knew. The powerful, untouchable Daniel Madison was finally broken. The man who had once looked at me with arrogance now spoke with defeat. And for the first time since this all began, I felt something unexpected. Not anger, not satisfaction, just emptiness. I sighed. "Daniel," he waited. "I'm not your solution." He exhaled. "I know." I nodded to myself, staring out the window at the city skyline. I had fought for this moment, but as I sat there, with Daniel's regret hanging between us like an unfinished sentence, I realized something. I didn't need this. I had already won. And so, with the calm certainty of a woman who had finally reclaimed her power, I said the words I should have said a long time ago. "Goodbye, Daniel." Then I hung up, and just like that, I was free. I should have felt victorious. I should have been celebrating as I watched everything unfold exactly as I had planned. Daniel was ruined. Olivia was gone. The house was on the market. His name, once respected in elite financial circles, was now whispered like a cautionary tale. And yet, as I stared out over the Boston skyline from my penthouse balcony, drink in hand, I felt nothing. The revenge I had spent months, years crafting was complete. The empire I had built for myself stood tall. The life Daniel had stolen from me had been restored, no, upgraded. But the emptiness lingered. Maybe it was the fact that he had called me in desperation, not anger. That the man who had once humiliated me, betrayed me, discarded me without a second thought, now sat alone in the ruins of his own making, with nothing and no one to turn to. And he had reached for me. Maybe it was the way I had hung up, without gloating, without rage, without the satisfaction I once thought I would crave. Because in the end, what was there left to say? My phone vibrated against the table. "Melissa." I took a slow sip of my drink before answering. "Tell me you have good news." "You mean besides the fact that Olivia is liquidating her assets and Daniel's credit rating is in the toilet?" Melissa laughed. "You'll love this. She's been in meetings all day with her legal team trying to untangle herself from his financial disaster. I give it a week before she completely cuts him loose." "Coward," I murmured. "She was never built for the storm," Melissa said knowingly. "She just wanted the illusion of power." I exhaled. "And Daniel?" There was a pause. "Evelyn, he's at the Meridian, your hotel?" My fingers tightened around my glass. Melissa sighed. "He booked a suite 2 floors below yours. Jonathan checked the reservations. He's not seeing anyone, not taking calls from his old partners. Just waiting." I closed my eyes. Waiting for what? You tell me. I already knew the answer. Daniel wasn't fighting anymore. He wasn't trying to salvage his career. He wasn't chasing after Olivia. He was waiting for me. A twisted, ironic full circle. Once, I had sat alone in our home, feeling like I had lost everything. Now, Daniel was the one sitting alone, while I stood here, untouchable, unstoppable, free. Melissa cleared her throat. "What are you going to do?" "Nothing," I said easily. "There's nothing left to do." A lie? A perfect, necessary lie. Because hours later, as the city grew quiet and the lights from the skyscrapers flickered like a million tiny secrets, I found myself standing in front of the Meridian. The doors opened before I even had to reach for them. The lobby was quiet, save for the faint hum of jazz playing through the speakers. I didn't know why I was here. Curiosity, closure. Maybe I just wanted to see him one last time. I stepped into the elevator, pressed the button for his floor, and as the doors slid shut, sealing me inside, I felt the first flicker of doubt. Because what if this was exactly what Daniel had been waiting for? The elevator ride to Daniel's floor felt endless. My heart should have been steady, controlled, like it always was. But for the first time in years, I felt something I couldn't quite place. The doors slid open with a soft chime. The hallway was empty, silent, the soft glow of the sconces casting long shadows against the polished floor. Daniel's suite was at the far end, room 1708. I hesitated before knocking. Maybe he wouldn't answer. Maybe I'd walk away, and this moment would become nothing more than a fleeting impulse, a curiosity I would bury and never think of again. But then, the door opened, and there he stood, Daniel Madison, the man I once loved, the man who had betrayed me, the man I had spent years destroying. But this was not the Daniel I remembered. Gone was the arrogant, confident powerhouse who had walked into every room as if he owned it. Gone was the man who had replaced me overnight, who had thrown me aside like a business deal gone bad. This Daniel looked hollow, disheveled, eyes shadowed, bloodshot, like he hadn't slept in days. His once impeccable suit now loosened, unkempt. His voice, when he spoke, was raw, stripped of everything. You came. I hated the way those two words landed, like a confession, like relief. I should have left. I should have walked away, letting him drown in the wreckage of his own making. But instead, I stepped inside. The suite was dimly lit, the curtains drawn tight. A half-empty glass of bourbon sat on the coffee table, next to a legal pad filled with notes, scribbles, calculations. He'd been trying to salvage something, anything. "Why are you here, Daniel?" I asked finally, my voice flat, unreadable. He let out a short, humorless laugh. "Would you believe me if I said I don't know?" I tilted my head. "I think you do." He exhaled, running a hand over his jaw. "I lost everything, Evelyn." A sharp, bitter smile tugged at my lips. "You left me while my mother was dying, took my home, threw me aside like an inconvenience. Now you want sympathy?" He shook his head. "No." Silence stretched between us, thick with unfinished sentences, untold regrets. Then he spoke again, quieter this time. "You were always 3 steps ahead of me, even when I thought I had it all figured out." "You never saw me as your equal," I replied, my voice cutting through the space between us. "You never thought I was capable of beating you at your own game." His gaze met mine, haunted, raw. I was wrong. The confession landed like a gunshot. And for the first time, something in me shifted. Because Daniel Madison, the man who had never admitted defeat, was finally standing in front of me with nothing left but the truth. I should have felt victorious. I should have walked away with satisfaction, vindication. But instead, I asked the one question I never thought I would. "What now?" His Adam's apple bobbed as he swallowed. "I don't know," he admitted. For the first time, neither of us did. And that, more than anything, terrified me. Betrayal cuts deep, but true power lies not in vengeance, but in control, patience, and strategy. Evelyn didn't just seek revenge. She ensured that Daniel felt the weight of his actions every single day. He thought he could replace her overnight, erase her from his life without consequence. Instead, she became the shadow that haunted his financial, personal, and professional ruin. But the real lesson? Underestimation is the greatest mistake. Daniel believed Evelyn was fragile, someone he could discard without a second thought. He was wrong. She wasn't just strong, she was brilliant. She played the long game, using her intelligence, resilience, and knowledge to turn betrayal into opportunity, destruction into success. Now, with Daniel standing before her, broken and defeated, Evelyn must decide. Has she won? Or is there still more to be done? What would you do in Evelyn's place? Forgive or finish the job? Comment below with your thoughts. If you're hooked on this story, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to Men's Cheating Story, and turn on notifications, because the next part will leave you speechless. You don't want to miss what happens next. On Fire.